Each and every Monday to wrap up NFL Sunday games is the one and only KC Joyner joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. KC, how you doing on this Monday?
Probably better than most Eagles fans. That was a pretty tough loss yesterday.
It definitely was. And I think one of the things that stood out to me, I really wanted to start here, is that one of the things that gets overlooked about this Cowboys team, Casey, is the fact that during this 5-game winning streak, the Cowboys have won the time of possession in every single one of those games. And yesterday, they almost doubled the Eagles in time of possession. So how are the Cowboys been so good at playing keep away from their opponents?
Back to their run blocking ways. We talk about how they were a couple of years ago. They were a team that basically their entire game plan revolved around their offensive line. The way they can control the line of scrimmage would allow them to dictate on offense what they wanted to do, and the defense they had the advantage because of what their offensive line could do. Funny thing is yesterday they do what they do. And according to my good blocking rate metric, which measures how often an offense gives its ball carriers quality run blocking, Cowboys only had good blocking on 33.3% of their carries yesterday, one-third of their carries. That's not a very good number. 45% is the league average. You want to be above 50. So the Eagles were able to keep the Cowboys' offensive running game in check for the most part, but the Cowboys had almost 40 runs for the game. So it says that it shows that the Cowboys were still able to do what they wanted to do.
So then did the Eagles' defense just run out of gas in the fourth quarter?
I think that's a big part of it. They did run out of gas, and in overtime, early in overtime, they had the same thing. They had a couple of plays too where they only allowed 1.5 yards per carry on plays where there was bad run blocking. That's a solid number, usually going to be between 1 and 2. But there were a couple of carries the Cowboys had that gained over 10 yards. So they could have shut that number down even more. And so some of the productivity there came from just allowing the Cowboys to break up big gains. And the Eagles also allowed 8.9 yards per attempt when they allowed good run blocking, which is not a good figure. They've had trouble with that all year, and yesterday was no exception.
The Eagles' offense has struggled all year to start games. They started every game this year slow. Yesterday, it was even more disturbingly obvious. What do you factor that to? What is the biggest difference between last year and this year with this Eagles' offense?
I'll tell you the thing that's striking about the Eagles' offense is from early starts is in the first and second quarter. The first half of the game yesterday, they only throw 3 vertical passes. That's a pass that travels 11 or more yards downfield. 3 vertical passes. One of them went to Ertz for 12 yards. He had one completion for 12 yards. Another went to Tate, one of your short pass targets, and the other went to Goddard. I mean, none of the passes are going to Jeffrey or Matthews or Aguilar or any vertical threats. You're throwing only 3 vertical passes, and you've got that. And last year, their vertical passing was much better. They had with more attempts, better completions, higher yards per attempt. You can look at any category, and their vertical passing was it. And they're only vertical passing right now when they absolutely have to.
A lot of times games, Casey, when I see Vikings games, I'm seeing plays from the Eagles game last year. I'm seeing Luck making passes and plays. I'm seeing Cousins running plays that we saw with Carson Wentz last year. Is it so simple that there were guys who were here last year that just are not here, and that's one of the things that's holding the Eagles back?
I still think it's the fact that they don't have one player who can tear the top off the defense. Last year they had Torrey Smith, and he's still this year, by the way, is one of they grade or they track how fast players run on particular plays. Earlier this season, he had the fastest play in I think it was in week 2. He was still he still has some wheels to him, but Eagles don't have anybody like that right now. Nobody that the defense has to go, okay, we have to worry about the fact that you're just going to run behind us. As good as Jeffrey is, he's an all-around receiver, very valuable asset, but not somebody who you say, okay, he's going to go 4.2 40, and if we don't be careful with how we handle him, he's going to tear the top off the defense. And I think that allows the defense to sit on more of the intermediate routes, and it doesn't allow your offense to take one of those shots. Having said that, I just think the Eagles this year have not been as aggressive. I think that they've been playing a close to the best approach in many ways, and if you dink and dunk pass all the time, you can succeed that way. The Patriots do it all the time with Brady, but it's not something that you want to do if you can help it.
Casey, a hot topic on the show today has been Carson Wentz and how much he has regressed this year as far as how he played last year. Looking at it, is it mechanically? Is it because I tweeted it yesterday? He has no confidence in his game. Period. What are you looking at when you're looking at the film?
Yeah, same thing. I think it's a matter of that. There's probably some rust still there, some injury rust, because usually when a player comes off an injury like that, it can take a year or so. Like, they'll come back in a year, but they don't a lot of times shake off the rust until year two. I think that's part of it, that he doesn't have he doesn't. I think there's some injury rust there. The pass blocking, as I mentioned last week in talking to Mike, their pass blocking over the past 5 weeks has been bottom third of the league, so he doesn't trust his pass blocking. I mean, that could be the entire thing, too, is if you don't think you can get pass blocking, you're not going to sit Wentz back there and say, hey, in fact, I think that's probably a concern for the Eagles. We don't want him to be taking hits because we missed him at the end of last year, and we don't want that to happen again, but you can't play like that. You can't play, I don't want to say play scared, but you can't play worried about that sort of thing. You've got to find a way to still get the vertical passes going. And again, third and fourth quarter, they threw 6 vertical passes. It's still that's more of a pace that you would have for an entire game, but that's after you fall behind. And they did pretty well. They had 13.2 yards per attempt on those passes. They had 2 vertical passes to Jeffrey, 1 to Aguilar, and they got 53 yards for those 2 vertical passes. So it started working in the second half, and I got to give Dallas some credit too. Their secondary is very strong against vertical passes, so that's part of it. But I like what the Eagles had done in the second half. What the Eagles did in the first half, or they did in the second half, and I think the outcome of the game would have been a lot different.
You know, we saw when Tom Brady came off of his ACL injury, he had the most interceptions he had in a season in the last 13 seasons, that one year in 2009. So there is a history of players when they come off an injury, they're not always where they should be or where they could be that first year back. So is it possibly with Wentz as simple, Casey, as we just need to give this guy another year before he's back to what he was?
I think that's part of it, and then you have the pass blocking issues. You have the lack of vertical receivers. You had early when he came back. You still have the Jeffrey is banged up, and so they haven't had a receiving core that they can say this is our core and these are our players. And he just got Tate just a few weeks ago, so he's getting used to Tate as what Tate can do and can't do as a receiver. So there hasn't been the kind of consistency in the passing game from a personnel perspective, and like I said, from a blocking perspective. So you start to get all those elements together, and it can really throw off your game. But again, you still have to find a way to go vertical one way or another, because you can't throw. I just don't think the Eagles. I don't think their game plan yesterday should have been, we're going to throw 3 vertical passes in the first half. I just think you've got to be able to do more than that against the Cowboys team. That if you can get them behind, they're not a good come-from-behind team.
KC Joyner joining us on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN, as he does each and every week here on the Sports Bash, reviewing as the Eagles lose to the Cowboys in overtime. Casey, one of the things that was very, very bizarre from yesterday's game, at least for me, was how well Dak Prescott did when he was blitzed. He had a high completion percentage, an even higher completion percentage when the Eagles blitzed versus when they did it. Why did that happen?
Because the Eagles don't have the quarterbacks to blitz. They don't have the blitz doesn't get there, and the quarterback can get the ball away. You're usually going to, if you don't have good cornerbacks, even if you have good cornerbacks, you might have trouble. But if you don't have good cornerbacks, you're going to have problems. And I mean, Prescott, we're talking about the vertical passing game. Looking at the numbers here for the third and fourth quarter and overtime yesterday, he only throws 7 vertical passes, but he completes 4 of them for, 136 yards and 19.4 yards per attempt average for him on those vertical passes. So that's the thing. He only has to hit a couple of those vertical passes, and suddenly it spikes his numbers. A lot of it was that touchdown pass to Cooper, too, 75 yards, but still, they hit that sort of play, and the Eagles don't. And that's, again, a game the Eagles could have won. That's one of the reasons they lose it.
Casey, what is the best way for someone to stop this Cowboys offense? We saw the Panthers do it in week 1. We've seen a couple other teams do it, but ever since they got Amari Cooper, it seems like this team has gone to another level. So how do you think is the best way for a team, whether it's this regular season or when they get to the postseason, the Cowboys to get slowed down?
I think teams need to worry more about their defense than they do their offense. Cowboys were run blocking over the past 2 weeks. 33% good blocking rate yesterday, 21% good blocking rate in Week 13. They're not an elite run blocking team like they have been. They can be a great run blocking team at times, but you can stop them. It is possible to stop that ground game. And Cooper, it's a matter of, again, you can't put Bosby on him. I mean, that's part of your problem when you've got essentially third or fourth string quarterback on him. You're not going to stop him with that, so you got to put a good cornerback on him and probably give bracket coverage and you can stop their ground game, but their defense is going to win them games. That's what's doing it. Because their defense yesterday, the Eagles were able to get some things done late. For most of the game, the Cowboys just dominated this game, and it speaks to who they are today. Their offensive line is a big element, but their defense is what's going to win them the division.
Speaking of the Cowboys' defense, and let me know if this is hyperbole or not, but I almost feel like, Casey, that this defense is better with Van Der Esch than they were with Sean Lee out there.
Oh, yeah, first off, he can stay healthy, or at least he's been able to do so this year. Yeah, I think Lee is a sideline to sideline player, great tackler, somebody who John Madden used to say that one of the things you wanted on defense was if you had one player who was really enthusiastic about tackling, it tended to make everybody enthusiastic about tackling. Your team would just generally be a better tackling team. I think Lee does that and can get that going. But I think Van Der Esch is every bit as good there, and he has the ability to make more impactful plays than Lee does. So I think you're right that it's an improvement, but they're both really good players.
All right, Casey, I got the question I got to ask you about the Cowboys that most people have been asking, and I want the football scientist perspective on this. Why has Amari Cooper been so good with the Cowboys when he wasn't good with the Raiders the past 2 years?
Because I think a big part of it is the Raiders. When you look at their vertical passing over the past couple of seasons, in fact, their pass blocking. Let's take last year, 2017. Their pass blocking was superb, and they still had an incredibly low vertical pass rate. Carr didn't want to force the ball downfield. He was afraid of making mistakes. He did not want to do things on vertical passing that he should do, because you've got the pass blocking and you've got the receiver to do it. You should be going vertical. So he just didn't want to do it. And Prescott, he doesn't mind going downfield. He doesn't mind taking some chances downfield. In fact, I think he knows that this offense needs to be taking those chances downfield. So I think it really boils down to some of it's been the matchups, too. Cooper's been able to find some really favorable matchups. But the idea that he's got a quarterback who says, fine, I'll throw a 50-50 jump ball, and I expect that you're just going to go get it, and I'll do that quite often. You couldn't get Carr to do that on a consistent basis, and you can't get Prescott.
KC Joyner joining us on Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Casey will be joining us again on Friday to look ahead to the Eagles' upcoming matchup with the Rams. But as this time we do each and every Monday, we review the rest of the Sunday games on NFL Week 14 here on 97.3 ESPN. Casey, I want to start with the other NFC East matchup. The score, yes, 40-16. It's an incredible score, but you have a Redskins defense with Allen and Payne and Kerrigan and Mason Foster and Josh Norman and HaHa Clinton-Dix, and Saquon Barkley made them look like Swiss cheese, Casey.
I think at Washington, once they have their quarterback issues, I think that the motivational levels of that team dropped dramatically. I think they realized that their season was over. I think they realized that we're not going to make the playoffs. We thought we were going to be something special this year, and now we're not. And that kind of thing is something that the head coach has to find a way to overcome, and Gruden obviously didn't do that yesterday.
Casey, watching the Kansas City Baltimore game, the hot topic has been Lamar Jackson over the last couple of weeks. When you watch him on film, what do you see positive and what do you see negative, and what's your outlook on him if he continues to start for the rest of the season?
Obviously a terrific runner, and they've been giving him good blocking, and he can give you ground gains both via scrambling and via planned rushing plays. The problem with Jackson stems back to a problem he had when he was at Louisville, that when teams get pass rush pressure in his face, he really makes a lot of bad decisions, and he doesn't handle it well. And eventually they're going to have to ask him to start being more of a drop-back passer and not just trying to win with his rushing. And when that happens, and if he doesn't handle the pass rush pressure well, they're going to lose some games. So I think that he is a good player, but you have to put a certain offense around him. I don't think they're going to be able to turn him into a drop-back passer this year.
Casey, the Browns win another one at home again, 26-20. The Panthers are spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, this Browns team, they're playing really good at home, and I kind of have to wonder, Casey, should Baker Mayfield maybe have started from the beginning of the year?
Yes, he should have started from the beginning of the year. They should have had a new coach at the beginning of the year. Well, I'll give you a scenario here, though. I saw this on Twitter. If the Browns went out, they beat Denver, Cincinnati, Baltimore in the last 3 games. The Ravens lose one of the last other 2 games, one of which is against the Chargers, so that's possible. If those 2 things happen and the Steelers lose out against the Patriots, the Saints, and the Bengals, that last one's an iffy one, but the other 2 are very possible losses. If that happens, the Browns win the AFC North.
You know, my co-host said before the season his hot take for the NFL season was the Browns would be an NFL playoff team. So I think you perked his ears up.
I said it was 10-6. I said 10-6. I didn't envision them losing all those overtime games or getting, crazy kicker things, but I did say they'd be 10-6. I envisioned Baker starting.
They should have. They should have had Giger started from day one, and he should be out the Rookie of the Year. I mean, he's not going to. But I mean, think about it. If he'd started from week one, you might be talking about him like that.
Casey, the Colts beat the Texans, snapped their winning streak after a rough week last week. Andrew Luck got back to being Andrew Luck in a spectacular way.
He did, and their pass blocking has been elite. Colts run blocking has been great at times and okay at other times. But the Texans have some problems because their front seven, or their offensive line, I should say, has been atrocious pass blocking this year and not so good at run blocking. And the Colts front seven is graded as one of the top 5 front sevens in the league over the past 5 weeks. So I think that speaks to where the Colts are. They're probably ascending in a way that the Texans, even though they'd won 9 straight, I think the Texans have more problems.
Casey, how did the Bears shut down the kid boy genius Los Angeles Rams offense and Sean McVay last night on Sunday Night Football?
Got to find a way to stop Mac, and they didn't, and that's a big part of it. And the ground game, I think, when you can't get your ground game going, and the Bears have a really strong run defense, and the Rams' rushing has been very good this year. The run blocking has been, but not quite as good as it was last year. When you start to get that, I don't want to say the Rams are a formula team, but if they can't power run the football and go vertical, they don't really have a good plan B, and that's really what the Bears took away from them. So you're not going to power run the football, and we're going to be able to get after your quarterback, and I think the Rams need to develop with a plan B and plan C. In fact, I think McVay has basically said that he lost the game for them yesterday, and he needs to figure out ways to better adjust down the line.
Casey, the Patriots lost in a game when both Brady and Belichick made unlikely mistakes for them. Brady taking that sack when he shouldn't have. The Patriots not stepping their foot on the gas in the second half, and then Gronk is back there at the end of the game. What happened?
Yeah, well, you got Gronk back there on a nearly 70-yard pass. You're not going to just stop a Hail Mary that way. But I tell you, the go to that last play should have been a guy named J.C. Jackson. He's number 27. You go back and watch the footage, and he is just lollygagging through that defense. He has a couple of opportunities to go chase Drake down and make a tackle, or at least slow him up so the other players can come around. He's a matador. He doesn't want anything to do with it. But he's a rookie cornerback out of Maryland. If I'm the Patriots, I cut him immediately to show the rest of the team you can't give this kind of effort down the stretch.
Casey, I said last week after the Saints lost that my stone-cold lead pipe lock of the year was that the Saints weren't just going to win this game, they were going to win double digits, because we all knew that Sean Payton was going to be peeved after the Cowboys lost. What did you see from the Saints on Sunday?
I wrote about this in my ESPN article today. It's on the ESPN Fantasy section behind the Plus paywall, looking at how blocking impacted fantasy performance, and it talked about Drew Brees. Drew Brees in the last 2 weeks has only thrown 15 vertical passes. That's tied for 27th in the league. He's only thrown 6 vertical passes off of play-action passing. That's in the middle of the league. This is a Saints offense that came into the year wanting to power run the football and only throw vertical when they had to. That's what they wanted to do. They've not been able to do it earlier this year for a variety of reasons. Now they're able to do it. That's who they want to be. So I don't think they're going to get into these high-scoring games. I think they want to go out there, power run, hit some vertical passes, and use their strong defense to win games. And it's working for them, but I don't think they're going to be getting 34 to 14 victories very often. KC
Joyner joining us at the Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Packers at home get the win. First game of the Joe Philbin era, even though Joe Philbin, 2 very questionable challenge calls, but you know what? Aaron Rodgers is still a really good player.
Didn't he do it like the first 5 minutes of the game?
Yeah, both of them on the first Falcons drive.
That's just ridiculous to do that sort of thing. It's Philbin, though. It might say that Al Davis had a saying about coaches. He said that a coach will usually have about 10 years with his team before the team starts tuning him out. And if you look through history, it can be 12 years, it can be 13, but it's right around that point. As soon as you get to double digits, it starts to be where your team starts to question you. I think the Packers, even though they liked and respected McCarthy, I think they had finally started to tune him out. So getting a fresh start just helped them play at their talent level.
You got the Jets and the Bills, Darnold versus Allen. We got to see Allen run around like a madman. Darnold get the game-winning touchdown. Interestingly game that came down the stretch there. What is your perspective on the 2 young quarterbacks?
still would take Darnold over Allen 7 days a week because Allen's a running quarterback and that can have a lot of success at times. But Darnold, when he was in college, he's one of the best college quarterback. I covered college football for ESPN for 7 years, and he was one of the best quarterbacks I saw in that time span. And I think the Jets are still going to like the fact that they made his pick down the road, and I think it says something for the Jets that they still played tough this late in the year, because the Bills they've been showing that they're playing tough, but the Jets sometimes have had up and down effort levels, and that they played as hard as they did yesterday. It speaks well to the coaching staff.
Yeah, the Bills coaching staff is a strange situation because they've now won games with two different quarterbacks. I mean, the team scored 41 points with Matt Barkley, so who knows what's really going on up there in Buffalo. Chargers beat the Bengals, a little closer than people expected, but that Chargers team is looking really good, Casey.
You go back to the last few years, they play this game. Sometimes this is the kind of game that the Chargers lose, and that's the difference between this team and those teams is they're winning these sorts of games. Their coaching staff, again, has them playing at an exceptional level, and the fact that you think about it, they have Gordon, he's out with an injury. Eckler, who suffered a stinger at the end of the game, but looks like he's going to be okay. He's a very good backup, maybe the best backup running back in the league. And they got Justin Jackson as a 3, and Justin Jackson, for the few plays that he does play, has been an impact player. That's a team that has, can get the vertical passing going, but now their backfield's strong. When they bring Gordon back, they don't even have to use him as a bell cup. They don't want to, so really deep backfield.
Casey, speaking of losses, the Steelers unexpectedly lose to the Raiders in Oakland. Ben Roethlisberger to play half the second half, and the Raiders crawl back into this game. What did you see from this Steelers team that made them so inept?
I could go on and on about this. I've been having back and forth Twitter battles with people about how bad the Steelers are. The one thing that stands out to me, though, this will speak better than anything else. A guy named Scott Kazmar works for Football Outsiders, and he posted something on Twitter and said, since 2007, NFL road favorites who are favored by 10 or more points are 60-11 straight up. In other words, they're big favorites, and they win 60 out of 71 games. Mike Tomlin has 4 of those losses. 4 of the 11, what we could essentially say are the biggest upsets in the last 12 seasons. Tomlin has 4 of them. His team didn't play to its talent level. He screwed up the timeouts at the end of the game. You could just go on and on and on. The special teams have been atrocious for weeks. They haven't fixed their kicking game at all. Roethlisberger went 25 of 29 yesterday for 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Didn't even play a few series that he could have played in and been medically cleared, and they still lose to an overmatched 2-10 Oakland team and might miss the playoffs because they got the Patriots this week and the Saints the next week. It could be the biggest collapse in Steelers history.
George Kittle and the 49ers take down the Broncos. Casey, what happened to the Broncos offense?
Well, it's called when you lose Emmanuel Sanders and you trade Demaryius Thomas and lose Emmanuel Sanders to an injury, and Courtland Sutton doesn't turn out to be very good as the number 1 because they had Courtland Sutton, Deshaun Hamilton, and I believe it was Tim Patrick will be the number 3 receiver. They're down to a 3rd-string tight end. They lost their top cornerback, Chris Harris, to an injury. He wasn't in the game yesterday, and they lost one of their top other cornerbacks as well. So when you suffer that many injuries and you have that many problems, I picked the 49ers to win the upset yesterday just because the Broncos have had so many injury issues and people are just not recognizing that this is a crushed team. I think that offense is going to have problems the last 3 weeks of the season. This is going to be a continuing issue for them.
Casey, you have a team in the Lions. They go on the road. I didn't know what to expect from this team, but they win 17-3. What happened to the Cardinals' offense, and are the Lions really that much better than the Cardinals?
I don't know that the Lions. When I was doing my power rankings for ESPN this week, we all do a collective power rankings that come out tomorrow morning. When I was doing my section of them, I wasn't sure where to put it. I got the Cardinals ranked last because the offense is just so inept. I mean, I think Rosen will be a good quarterback down the road, but he's got a lot of problems right now. And he really only has one good receiver because their receiving course banged up too. They don't have a tight end to speak of, and it's Fitz, who's he has limitations. They got nobody else because Kirk was out in IR last week. So I think that's a big part of the problem for them, and it probably says more for where the Cardinals are than where the Lions are. But give the Lions credit; their defense played a lot better, and the offense got enough done.
Tonight, Monday Night Football, 2 teams that are fighting to stay in the playoff hunt: the Seahawks and the Vikings. Casey, I hate to make it this simplistic, but to me, this game comes down to the fact that this is in Seattle and not Minnesota.
I actually, believe it or not, I'm picking the Vikings in this one. Which I would
really?
I would pick Seattle normally, but when I did my run defense or my overall defense grades, my front 7 defense grades from my ESPN article last week, the Seahawks rank last in those grades over the past 5 weeks. Their defense has been terrible. And that's I think Dalvin Cook gets his first 100-yard game. I think that Cousins is going to have all kinds of time to throw, and it's going to make the game a sort of shootout game that Seattle doesn't fare well in.
He is KC Joyner. KC, I'm rolling with the 12s tonight, so we'll see when we talk on Friday who was right. Okay.
That sounds like a plan.
KC Joyner, always appreciate your time. Follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS for all of your NFL and fantasy football coverage, as well as coverage of the WWE. KC, appreciate the time as always.
Appreciate it, man.